He smiled the day his world collapsed. But she couldn't. Lily Carson stood under the white lights of the auditorium, trembling, her final presentation dissolving into silence. The judges whispered. The projector flickered, and in that moment, every dream she'd built turned to dust. What if failure wasn't a dead end, but the beginning of something greater? What if being broken was the only way to rebuild stronger? The whispers grew louder. Laughter in the back row pierced her chest, and she felt the sting of shame crawl up her throat. She walked out without looking back, leaving behind the version of herself who had believed she could make it. Sometimes the moment that destroys you is the one that sets your soul free. But she didn't know that yet. The next morning, the sunlight felt cruel. Lily woke in her small rented room, walls covered with old sketches and dreams that now mocked her. The world outside carried on, students laughing, buses rushing, while she lay still, replaying her failure. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't open. Some offered pity. Others didn't bother hiding their delight. She whispered to herself, maybe they were right. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice murmured, not yet. That afternoon, Lily packed her things. No one stopped her. The campus that once felt like her world now felt foreign, echoing with laughter that wasn't hers. She carried her box of belongings, a cracked laptop, a few books, and the last piece of her pride. As she stepped into the cold, the security guard gave a polite nod. She smiled back, barely. Back home, her mother waited by the kitchen window. Rosa Carson had aged more in worry than in years. When Lily walked through the door, their eyes met, one filled with apology, the other with silent understanding. No words were needed. They hugged for the first time in months, tears falling between them. That night, Lily sat by her window, watching raindrops crawl down the glass. The city lights blinked like distant hopes. She opened her old notebook, the one filled with sketches, quotes, and plans for a future she thought she'd lost. Her eyes lingered on a note she'd once written to herself. One day I'll be proud of me. She smiled faintly through tears. Maybe that day hadn't come yet. But it would. Days became weeks. The noise of failure faded, replaced by the hum of survival. Lily took a small job at a corner cafe, brewing coffee for strangers who never looked her in the eye. Each morning she wore the same faded apron, the same tired smile. People ordered, laughed, and left, while she stayed behind the counter, invisible. She wondered if this was all she'd ever be now. A forgotten name behind a register, a once promising girl who didn't make it. Yet, beneath that dull ache, a quiet would begin to stir. Not loud, not bright, just steady. At night, she walked home through empty streets. The world around her was painted in the colors of loneliness, flickering streetlights, wet asphalt, echoes of laughter from people going somewhere she wasn't. Sometimes she caught her reflection in a shop window and didn't recognize the woman staring back. The confident girl who once dreamed of changing the world was gone. What remained was someone still learning how to breathe again. Her mother tried to help. Rosa left little notes on the fridge, reminders to eat, to rest, to try again. But Lily's replies were always short. Some days she sat by the kitchen window watching her mother fold laundry, realizing how much love hides in small things. Yet guilt pressed heavy on her chest. She wanted to be strong for her mother, but she couldn't even be strong for herself. One afternoon, while wiping tables at the cafe, Lily overheard two customers from her old university. Their laughter cut deep, stories of promotions, new projects, glowing futures. Her name floated between their words like a ghost. "Remember Lily Carson," one said. What a waste of talent. She froze, rag in hand, her heart sinking. For a moment, she wanted to disappear. Warning. Charles? But instead, she whispered to herself, not forever. It was the first time in months she'd said something that sounded like hope. That night, Lily came home and sat on the floor of her small room. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, tired, but still breathing. She realized she had survived the day, and the one before it, and the one before that. Maybe survival was the first step to strength. She reached for her old sketchbook, hesitated, then opened it. The pages smelled like dust and memory. Somewhere inside, beneath all of that silence, her story wasn't over yet. A week later, while cleaning her room, Lily found an old notebook hidden beneath a stack of forgotten clothes. Its pages were filled with sketches. Her designs, her ideas, her voice from before everything fell apart. The paper smelled of graphite and dreams. As she turned the pages, something stirred in her chest. Not pride, not confidence, but something quieter. Possibility. For the first time in months, she smiled. Faintly, but real. The next morning, Lily sat at the cafe counter before her shift began, pencil in hand. Her fingers moved hesitantly at first, sketching simple lines, shapes that had once come naturally. A coworker glanced over her shoulder, surprised. "You draw?" he asked. Lily smiled softly. "I used to." But that morning, as the pencil moved again, she realized she still did. In the evenings, she began to jog by the river near her apartment. The first few runs left her breathless and sore, but she kept going. With every step, her thoughts untangled. Failure lost its weight, and her heartbeat reminded her she was still alive. The world didn't seem so cruel when she was moving through it. One slow afternoon, a customer left behind a magazine. On the cover, a design competition Lily had once dreamed of entering. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, reading about the theme, the deadline, the opportunity. Fear whispered, "You'll fail again." But that same small voice inside her whispered louder, "Try." She tore out the page and folded it carefully into her pocket. That night, Lily sat at her desk, sketchbook open, pencil ready. For a moment, doubt lingered like a shadow beside her. Memories of failure, laughter, judgment. But she took a deep breath and began to draw. The first line was shaky, the second stronger, the third filled with life. It wasn't perfection she was chasing anymore. It was herself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was coming home. The following week, Lily filled out the application for the National Design Competition. Her hands trembled as she typed her name, the same name that once stood for failure. She hesitated before pressing submit, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a contest. It was her chance to rewrite everything. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like running. She was stepping back into the storm that had once drowned her. But this time, she knew how to swim. Days turned into nights filled with work. Lily sketched until her pencil tips dulled, shaping designs that reflected both pain and perseverance. The fear of not being enough whispered constantly, but she kept going. Sometimes, she would look at her reflection in the window and whisper, "You're not who you were." Each design was a piece of her healing, proof that broken things could still create beauty. When the competition shortlist was announced, Lily almost didn't check the results. She was sure she hadn't made it. But as her eyes scrolled down the page, there it was. Her name, finalist. Lily Carson. The world seemed to stop. Her breath caught in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. After everything, after all the silence and shame, someone saw her again. The event hall was vast and bright, filled with designs from people who had never fallen the way she had. As Lily set up her display board, her heartbeat echoed in her ears. Then she saw her, Mrs. Danner, her former professor, standing among the judges, the same woman who once told her, "You don't have what it takes." For a moment, the air grew heavy. But Lily didn't look away. She straightened her shoulders, smiled slightly, and kept working. Later that evening, Lily stood outside the hall, the city lights flickering behind her. Ethan, her old classmate, found her there, smiling, nervous, proud. "You did it," he said softly. She laughed, shaking her head. "Not yet." she replied, looking up at the stars. "But I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time since the day her world collapsed, Lily wasn't chasing approval. She was standing in her own worth. The night before the final presentation, sleep wouldn't come. Lily sat awake, the city quiet outside her window. Every voice from her past returned. The laughter, the whispers, the disappointment. The same words replayed in her mind. "You don't have what it takes." Her chest felt heavy. But even through the ache, she whispered, "Maybe I do." The battle wasn't with them anymore. It was with herself. Morning came too soon. Her reflection in the mirror showed sleepless eyes and trembling hands. She dressed carefully, fixing her blazer as if putting on armor. Her mother waited at the door, eyes filled with pride and fear. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," Rosa said gently. Lily smiled faintly. "I know, Mom. Just to myself." Then she left, carrying all the weight of her second chance. At the competition hall, Lily waited for her turn. Her pulse raced, palms damp. Across the room, her old rival, Maya Lin, smiled politely. Her confidence sharp and unshaken. "Good luck," Maya said. Lily nodded, her voice steady. "You too." As Lily watched her rival's flawless presentation, the doubt returned like a wave. But when she looked down at her own designs, they didn't just show talent. They showed survival. When her name was called, Lily's legs almost refused to move. She stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. She spoke not about perfection, but about imperfection, about how brokenness had shaped her designs. The judges listened in silence. By the time she finished, the room was still. She exhaled, finally free. When she stepped outside after the presentation, the sky had turned gray, wind brushing her face. She stood alone on the steps, letting the cool air wash over her. She didn't know yet if she'd won. But for the first time, that didn't matter. She had stood where she once fell and didn't break. That, she realized, was victory enough. The results were announced a week later. Lily almost didn't open the email. Her hands hovered above the mouse, heart pounding. Then she clicked. A gasp escaped her lips. She hadn't just placed, she had won. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The girl who was left to fail had done the impossible. Then, tears broke free. Not of sadness, but of relief. She whispered softly to herself, "You did it." When she arrived at the awards ceremony, the hall was filled with faces she recognized, some that once doubted her, some that had forgotten her completely. As she walked down the aisle, whispers followed, but this time they didn't sting. They sounded like acknowledgement. The woman who had once walked away in shame now walked toward applause. When Lily took the stage to accept her award, she looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces. But only one stood out, Mrs. Danner. Their eyes met for the briefest second. The professor gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. No words, no apology. But in that moment, Lily realized she didn't need either. Forgiveness had already found her. After the ceremony, Ethan found her outside the venue. "You were incredible," he said, smiling the same warm smile that once gave her courage. She laughed, tears still fresh. "I didn't think I'd ever come back here," she admitted. He replied gently, "You didn't come back. You rose." And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. Later that night, Lily returned home. Her mother waited by the door, tears already in her eyes. Without a word, Lily placed the award in Rose's hands. "This belongs to both of us," she whispered. They embraced as laughter and tears mingled. The house that had once been heavy with silence was now filled with light. Lily's journey was no longer about proving others wrong. It was about becoming who she was meant to be. Weeks passed, yet the feeling never faded. Not pride, but peace. Lily returned to her old university, not as a student, but as a guest. The same hall where she once broke stood, unchanged. Yet she wasn't. She stood on that stage again, speaking to new students about failure, resilience, and the power of trying one more time. The audience listened. The same silence that once hurt her now held respect. After her talk, Mrs. Danner approached her. For a moment, both women stood silently, surrounded by echoes of the past. Then, the professor spoke quietly. "You proved me wrong, Lily. And I'm glad you did." Lily smiled, not out of triumph, but understanding. "You taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn," she replied. It wasn't bitterness between them anymore. Only respect, shared across the distance time had softened. Lily started her own small studio in the city, a space where creativity felt safe again. Young designers came seeking guidance, and she gave them what she once needed most: belief. The walls were filled with colors, sketches, and laughter. For every student who doubted themselves, she shared her story. "You're not your mistakes," she would say. "You're what you do after them." One evening, Ethan stopped by her studio with coffee. They sat by the window, watching the city glow below. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Sometimes," she said, "but mostly, I think about how far I still want to go." Their laughter echoed in the quiet room. Two souls who had learned that the best endings are just new beginnings in disguise. Late one night, Lily sat alone in her studio. The city outside hummed with distant life. She opened her old notebook, the same one she had nearly thrown away years ago. On the last page, she wrote, "Failure didn't break me, it built me." She smiled, closed it gently, and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, another girl was about to fall. And one day, rise just like she did. And that was enough.